The Chargers found an undrafted steal. He's not only made the 53-man roster, but he's also making the case for significant playing time in 2025. Nikko Reed was one of the best players for the Chargers this preseason, and he's now making it one of the deepest positions for the Bolts on defense. What's up, everyone? I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg for Chargers Digest, where we talk about all things Lightning. Today, we're talking about Nikko Reed, who fortunately made the 53-man roster just a few days ago, despite being an undrafted rookie. So we're going to talk about a little bit of his background, then we're going to talk about how he plays and where he fits on the Chargers defense in 2025. So, let's talk about it. At 22 years old, Nikko Reed's career seemed over before it even began. For context, he didn't receive a combine invite, which only happens to players who the NFL thinks don't have much of a chance of making an NFL roster. But Reed still worked out at his pro day, and he showed rather middling numbers. He was only 5'9" and about 180 pounds, and generally speaking, when you have a player who's that small, you have to see them show some form of high-end athleticism in order for them to make it into the league. Reed didn't. He didn't have bad athletic numbers according to his RAS score, but he was only about average when it came to his athleticism, specifically when it comes to speed and burst. And that's very important because if you're going to be a small corner, you have to play fast. If you're a big corner, it's okay to play a little bit on the slow end. Reed is both a little bit slower and also a little bit smaller, which means his chances of making an NFL roster were pretty slim. But he continued to fight for a position. And we have to talk about his career in college because it's rather interesting. Now, Nikko started his college career with the Colorado Buffaloes in 2021. He played 2 years for the team, but then transferred to Oregon. A big part of that was a lot of the turnover that happened at Colorado. If you remember, after the 2022 season was when Deion Sanders took over. Now, Deion wanted to keep a lot of the players that were already on the roster, but whenever you see a coach get fired from a college football team, you start to see a lot of players enter the transfer portal just because that was the guy who got them to that school. He was the guy who sold them on going to Colorado. Then Deion comes in, all of a sudden things change. So, Nikko entered the transfer portal and he went to Oregon, where he immediately became a starter. And he was very impressive in his time at Oregon. His last season in 2024, he had 64 tackles, he also had 13 pass breakups, and he led the team with 2 interceptions. But more importantly was the fact that he was one of the best players when it came to flexibility. And that's something that's very, very crucial for NFL rosters. They want to see guys who can play left, right, slot, and most importantly, be able to communicate with the other players in that secondary. And I think that's something that Nikko has consistently shown in his career. When I was doing research for this video, I decided to look at some of Nikko's numbers during his last year at Colorado because that was when a lot of things were changing. For context, at the end of the 2022 season, the Buffaloes, they fired their defensive coordinator midway through the year, and that changed the entire way their defense played. For the first part of the year, they primarily were a cover 2 team, which means that they had those 2 high safeties. Then, once the coordinator was fired, they started running a lot more cover 3 and cover 6, and that changes how corners have to communicate with safeties to determine their alignment schemes. When you look at Nikko, he was easily able to adjust to whatever was thrown at him, which is why he had one of the better PFF grades and also was considered a vital part of that Colorado defense at the end of the year. I actually decided to take a look at some of the deep dive numbers, and it was really interesting that quarterbacks tended to avoid throwing Reed's way. In fact, they didn't even look his way about 65% of the time on the downfield passing numbers. On that 35% of the time that they did look his way, 14% of the time they immediately looked to another option. 8% of the time they threw it his way and it fell incomplete. And then 5% of the time, that was how much was caught when it was thrown Nikko's way. Overall, he only had a 3% burn rate during his entire college football career. That's one of the best marks during that time span. But despite all of that, because of his athletic limitations, Nikko didn't get a combine invite and was not drafted over the 3 days of the NFL draft. So he had a bit of an uphill climb, but what could he bring to the table? Well, I think Lance Zierlein summed up Nikko's skill set very well in his NFLDraft.com profile. Lance said that Reed is a bit of an undersized slot corner, which makes his competitiveness outside that much more impressive. He will play full-time as a slot in the pro, but bigger receivers will always have jump ball advantages on him. He's better in a press man coverage lineup where he can onboard and ride the route early on instead of being forced to mirror and match breaks from his pedal. Now, I think for the most part, that's a pretty spot-on take from Lance. I do disagree when it comes to the breaking ability. Now, we've already talked about how he has below average athleticism, or average athleticism, I should say, when it comes to making those breaks. But one thing he does have is elite timing and an elite sense of spacing. That's something he showcased very well during his time at Oregon. In fact, it was in that second to last year at Oregon when he faced off against none other than then Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh. I want you to take a look at these two plays because in both of them you can see Nikko instantly react to whatever play is thrown out in front of him, and before any other defenders are even turning that way to make the play, Reed is already there for the tackle and for the breakup. This showcases his ability to process the field at an elite level, which is very important for the NFL because that time span when you have to be able to make a decision is very, very short. He continued to play well the remainder of the preseason, really making his case in the final preseason game against the Niners, showcasing the ability once again to read and react and have 2 pass breakups, and also some impressive tackling ability as well, which is something Jesse Minter values in his defense. His play earned the praise of Coach Jim Harbaugh. Harbaugh said in one of his post-game press conferences, "We've got a lot of ascending players who have been ascending in practice, and I couldn't wait to see them play in a real game. Nikko Reed has been battling, working through things all camp, and he continues to work through them and play good." If you catch the attention of your head coach, that's a sign of good things to come. Here we go to NFL roster day, and lo and behold, Nikko has made the 53-man roster. A big part of that is because of the encouraging competition the Chargers have in their secondary. In fact, Jesse Minter has repeatedly said that he wants to have a deep corner room. He was quoted as saying, "You can never have enough corners. It's a great competition in there. Tarheeb and Cam are doing great, and Dante Jackson has come on big time." Now, so far, that seems to be the players who are ahead of Reed when it comes to starting in the secondary for the Chargers. Their current lineup right now has Tarheeb manning one outside spot and either Dante Jackson or Benjamin St-Juste on the other side. Cam Hart, the 5th-round pick last year, was also someone who played very well for the Chargers last year. He's in that rotation too. Interestingly, though, the Chargers play a lot of defense in nickel. That means that you're going to have 3 defensive backs and 2 safeties. Now, normally Derwin James is going to be the one who's going to be playing the slot, but Reed's ability adds a different factor here for the Chargers. They could continue to play that 4-man combination at the 2 outside corner spots, and now you can slide Reed into that slot corner position, which is where he seems like he's at his most natural fit. That position is all about being able to read, react, and break quickly, all things that are in Nikko's skill set. Minter shouted out Reed's work during the preseason and in training camp, saying that, quote, "I think he went into the game trusting himself and kind of what he had done in practice. It's the first preseason game. It's great to make those plays and show you can do it. Now to really take that next step, can you be that repetitive player?" And he played the way I thought he would play. This is a very deep position for the Chargers, and it's going to be difficult to ascertain where everything is going to finish by season's end. But so far, Nikko Reed has proven himself to not only be an NFL caliber player, but someone who's deserving of significant playing time in 2025. Thank you all so much again for watching. I'm Sam Peña, the bold fan in the Berg. Remember to like and subscribe to the video. We're trying to build the channel here from the ground up so we can continue to bring more content just like this for you at home. Thank you all so much again, and remember, Bolt Nation, bolt up.